I think it's so important to ask yourself, why am I not putting myself out there more? Why am I not making the effort to grow my email list? Because my friend, the leads are such a huge part of you hitting your revenue goal. When you sit down and break the numbers down, which I'm going to do in a second, when you do that, I promise you, you'll say, holy crap, I need more leads.
My guest today is a dear friend of mine.
One of them goes, that one over there, she's big money. And it was my guest today.
Her name is Amy Porterfield.
Amy Porterfield, the ever amazing,
best-selling author of 2 Weeks Notice, Miss Amy Porterfield.
You've probably heard me talk about the Millie Club. It's a group that I started last year where I take 30 women who are around 500K or more in their business, and I help them get to their first $1 million year and beyond. So it's a mastermind, and I'm in my second cohort now. And one thing that I've realized that I think my whole community would find great value from is that it's so easy not to know all your numbers. We did an in-person event, and one of the exercises I took the Millie members through was to really break down everything they needed to know in order to understand how many leads do they need and what does their conversion need to be in order to hit their goal. Now you might think, yeah, that's a given, but most people don't sit down and really crunch those numbers. And so I thought, well, this could be a really great episode where I quickly take you through what numbers you definitely should be tracking on a regular basis, and also how to break some of these numbers down so that you can predict your next launch revenue goal. And so I just want to break it all down for you today in hopes that this gives you a little bit of clarity. So the thing is, like I mentioned, most entrepreneurs, they stop at top line revenue. So they think, okay, I made $300,000 this year. Last year I made $200,000. Great, I'm growing. But surface level numbers won't take you to your next level. The real growth is hidden in the data that most people overlook. And it's easy to overlook. And let's be honest, sometimes the numbers stress us out. If you're having a hard year and the numbers are not shaking out how you want them to, then of course you kind of want to close your eyes and close your ears and say, no, I'm not going to even look. I've so been there. And also, even if you're not having a hard year, maybe you're just getting started. So numbers aren't where you want them to be. That's very normal. It took me a few years to really stabilize my numbers and grow them. And so looking at the data can be hard sometimes, but you are a business builder. You are an entrepreneur. And so you cannot shy away from the numbers. And the numbers tell a story. And if you want to change that story, then you've got to know your numbers. So the kind of data that shows you what's actually working, what quietly might be draining your energy, and where your untapped potential is sitting, those numbers are just waiting to be unlocked. You can access them, and I promise it's not as scary as you think. So when you know your numbers, you stop flying blind and you stop spiraling into guilt or comparison or imposter syndrome when things feel messy, because you know exactly what's going on underneath the surface. So I recently wrote a newsletter that by the time this comes out, it will already have come out. And it's about getting into a group text with a few of your business friends and sharing your journey of the ups and downs of building a business and doing launches and selling online and stumbling and the challenges and the wins and all of that. So I have a few different group chats with some of my girlfriends in business, and we share a lot of details. But I have 2 or 3 friends I would say, that we share actual numbers with. We break it all down. When we do a launch, we'll say, okay, this is how much I spent in ads. This is how much revenue I brought in. These were my total expenses. This was my conversion on my webinar. Here's how many leads I got. Here's where I struggled. Here's where it worked. Like, imagine if you had a few friends that were in it like you are and they shared numbers. When you know your numbers and then they share theirs, you're not comparing yourself to them, but instead you're kind of being enlightened. Like, oh, okay, that's possible, or, ooh, I could see where I could get stuck over there, or I saw that they overcame this challenge. Let me try that. So you really add value to each other. So I added that in my newsletter. Again, if you are not on my newsletter, I am giving so many great gems around how to up level your business, no matter where you are on your journey. So it's just amyporterfield.com/newsletter. If you're not getting my weekly newsletters, it comes out every Tuesday. Usually there's a wacky subject line, so it really stands out, but definitely get on that newsletter to get some tips like this. So I love the idea of a group money chat, essentially. And with that, if you want to be really valuable in that group, you've got to understand your numbers. And so in this episode, I'm walking you through 4 must track metrics, plus the mindset shifts that will help you not just grow your business, but truly own the success that you're creating. Oh, and one more thing before I dive in that I want to add, that is that sometimes people throw out numbers on the internet that seem wildly impressive, but it's funny that they never share the conversion rate or the leads that it took them to get there, or how much they spent in ads, or they don't share profit margin. And so the next time you find yourself comparing yourself to some content creator that's throwing out numbers, dig in a little bit deeper and see if they ever talk about their profit margin, if they ever talk about their ad spend. These are things that I really dive into, especially in my programs and with my masterminds, sharing the good, bad, and ugly, so that when you hear numbers, you realize, look, I'm not that far off, or they're not doing that much better than me. Or maybe they are and you could be inspired by it, but it's not just about revenue. However, that is where we're going to start, but it's not where we're going to end. So the first pillar that I want you to focus on is vision-backed revenue. So vision-backed revenue, not just revenue, but vision-backed revenue. I'll get into that in a moment. But here's what to track every single year. And quite honestly, I want you to be tracking this on a monthly basis. I believe you should be checking into your numbers every single month. But overall, you need to track your revenue, obviously, right? So that's a given. But remember to track your revenue goal versus actual revenue. So if you started this year and you wanted to make $250,000, that's your revenue goal. But we've got to be tracking that against what's actually happening. And at the time I'm recording this, we're about halfway into 2025. And this is a good time to reevaluate, to look at your numbers. Are you ahead? A lot of people right now in my community are behind. It's a really wonky year. And so it's a good time to reset and think, what could I do differently to hit this goal if I'm off track? So I think we should be doing that every single month. But there's like a philosophical layer here. So this is the moment where desire meets data. Setting a revenue goal isn't just a business decision. It's an energetic declaration. It's saying, I believe I'm capable of holding this level of success. And I think many women avoid setting high goals because they fear disappointment, or because they don't want to feel the vulnerability of wanting something so deeply, and missing the mark is just a lot. It's a lot to handle. I have absolutely been guilty of this. In the past, I have set really low goals and then I hit them and then I make myself feel great. But that's not how you grow a business. A few years ago, my business coach, Michael Hyatt, he said to me, if you're hitting every single goal each year, whether they be like launch goals or lead goals or overall revenue goals or profit goals, he said, you're not setting big enough goals. You're not meant to hit every single goal. You're meant to really go after something big. That's why in our business, we always have a good, better, best goal, because we want to hit really big goals. And sure, it's disappointing when we don't, but I always think, okay, let's say I wanted to hit $10 million in my next launch and I came up short. Let's say I hit 9 million. First of all, you know, the whole gap in the gain, right? My favorite book. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, I missed it by $1 million, I need to focus on, oh my gosh, I hit a $9 million launch. That's like a big deal. So number one, that's a little psychological shift right there. The gap in the gain. I got to focus on the gain. But the second thing is, I believe I likely wouldn't have hit 9 if I didn't set my goal to 10. I probably would have hit 7 or 8. It's kind of wild how that works in my business, where the bigger goals, we might not hit all of them, but we definitely went past what I actually thought we could do. So for me, bigger goals are necessary, even if I'm not hitting them. But I had to get thicker skin. I had to not look at the negative in that and think, oh my gosh, I'm always off on my goals. That is what pushed me forward. That is what actually grew my business, allowing myself to hit those big goals. So if you're not setting those big goals, it's likely because you are feeling vulnerable and you feel bad when you don't hit them. We need to change our mindset around that. I'm all about setting big goals, but realistic goals. So when I set a revenue goal, I literally have broken down all the numbers behind it, which I'm going to show you in a moment. So I'm not just throwing like a number, catching it out of thin air, throwing it on my P&L and saying, let's hit 50 million. Like, no, I don't do it that way either. So stay with me because I've got a little bit of breakdown that you can use. So if you're afraid to name your dream revenue number, what you're really saying is, I don't trust myself to hold success if it actually comes. Or I don't trust myself that that's even possible. And so there's a lot of psychological warfare that could go into goal setting, especially when you're setting them too small. So you kind of want to do a gut check on what it looks like in your business. Remember, the gap between your revenue goal and where you ended up, it isn't failure, it's feedback. You've got to have that feedback. So if you're not setting big goals, let's reevaluate and consider a good, better, best. Good is, hey, I'll take it. That wasn't my best year, but I feel good about that. Better is, all right, I'm inching toward what I really want, and I'm excited that I surpassed that good. And then best is, holy cow, I need to do a happy dance and call my mom because I just hit a huge, huge goal. It's that kind of thing. Okay, so pillar 1 is revenue. Pillar 2 is protecting your profit. So this is a big one, and I just don't think enough of us talk about it online. So every year and every month, you're tracking total expenses, then profit margin, and really ROI. And what I mean by that is your time versus the return, because you do have to pay attention to what kind of effort, what kind of time did you have to put into this in order to hit that revenue and profit margin. So philosophical layer of this, revenue is exciting, but profit is what gives you freedom. I'm going to say that one more time. Revenue is exciting, but profit is what gives you that freedom that you're looking for. We hear a lot about how to make more, but far less about how to keep more. And so what kind of sparked this episode is in my Millie Club, when I started to talk to the ladies about their profit margin. It was interesting. Some of them had really high profit margins, 50, 60, 70%. A woman in my Millie Club has a 70% profit margin. Now, at first, you have to celebrate that. Like, good for her. I feel like that is not easy to do. And she's keeping a lean team, a lean business, and she's doing amazing things in her business. She's making great revenue. But what I told her was, you are leaving so much money on the table because you're not reinvesting back in the business. I believe to my core, you have to spend money to make money. And if in this case, she wants to get to $1 million a year, she can't keep a 70% profit margin. At least I think it will hold her back, and it will be a long time till she hits that $1 million mark. But if she's willing to spend more, usually on paid advertising, but also she's doing a good job of coaching. You know, the Millie Club is not cheap, and she invested in coaching there. Maybe other areas of coaching to help her as well could really go a long way. It could literally unlock her to 2 million, not just 1 million. And then there's some women in my Millie Club, and really in all my communities, different communities I have, where their profit margin is like 10%. Or 20%. And, you know, I teach women who have digital courses, memberships, coaching programs. So we're doing everything online. So there should be very low overhead beyond, let's say, the people you work with. My biggest expense is paid advertising and my team. That's where I spend the bulk of my money. And so those are areas you should be spending on. However, if your profit margin, I believe, is lower than 30%, and I don't mean to be reckless with that. There's exceptions to this. But for most of my students and the people that I serve, 30% or higher is definitely the goal. So if you wanted a benchmark, I'm going to throw that out for you. If you're paying a lot of coaches, if you are paying a lot of affiliates, maybe a sales team, I don't know, depending on what your business looks like, it could look a little bit different, but most of my students can get to 30% or higher. So if you're lower than that, I want you to pay attention. Here's the truth. When the money finally lands, the sabotage often follows. Why? Because having money can trigger old beliefs like, I have to work harder to deserve this, or I'm not allowed to keep this much. So these identity stories quietly shape how much success that you'll allow yourself to hold. So here's what protecting profit looks like practically. So you want to know your expenses in detail, track them by categories such as team salaries or contractor salaries or software, tools, paid ads, all of that. And you really want to look at the details and then review your profit monthly, quarterly, and yearly. So revenue in, expenses out, what's left over. And you want to ask, was the effort worth the return? If this launch took 80 hours of your time, did the profit reflect that investment? You want to do a time audit if you're not sure. Now, listen, in your early years, I usually say early years are like your first 3 or 4 years. Sometimes the effort does not match the profit. And that's where you're in that hustle mode. And as much as I hate talking about hustle and I regret the years that I did hustle, I do think they're essential, at least in the first 2 years. I don't know anyone who's grown a business that hasn't hustled to do so, said yes more often than no, late nights, weekends. I can't sugarcoat it. I can't imagine building a business, especially because a lot of you are still in a 9 to 5, without being in that hustle season. But it's a season. And so you do have to really work hard on taking yourself out of it, something I didn't know until years ago. Like I hustled way too long and I do not think it's necessary. Now, do I get into seasons of hustle? Absolutely. When I was marketing my book 2 weeks notice and I really was going for New York Times, so I worked hard at that. That was absolutely a hustle season. And then when it was over, it wasn't. And I took a lot of time away. And so you have to know your seasons as well. But the reason I bring this up now is that if you look at your profit and think, is that all? Like all that work for that? That's when we have to start looking at, okay, where am I spending money that maybe I don't need to be spending right now? Or where am I losing money? Meaning, do I have too many offers? Am I stretched too thin? Does nothing actually get my full attention? You all know that Digital Course Academy is my signature program. I teach people how to create and launch digital courses. And the secret to so many people's success in that program is that they create one course and they get really good at launching it over and over and over again, whether they launch it live or automated evergreen. And so it's one course that you go over and over and over again in terms of promotion. So you get really good at it. Guess what happens when you have one course that you're dedicated to launching over and over and over again, like 2 to 3 times a year? You could have other smaller offers, but I'm talking the bulk of your focus goes there. Guess what happens? Expenses go down. The course is already created. Now you're just fine tuning it. Your marketing assets are already creating it. You can reuse a lot of them. Did you hire a copywriter to write all your emails? Well, now you can just kind of zhuzh up those emails and not have to start from scratch. When you don't start from scratch, your expenses go down. So if you feel like you're spending way too much money, here's a little secret. It's likely because you keep starting from scratch or you keep redoing things from scratch. That's where money starts to really drain, or you're doing way too much. So really paying attention to how you're spending money is so incredibly important. And I do believe some of your best investments are team, whether they're employees or contractors, paid advertising, and coaching for yourself. The coaching part, I've never had a year where I haven't invested in myself. You don't know what you don't know. And being guided by someone who's gone before you and is willing to show you how they've done it, it's a good investment. Hopefully, You choose a good coach or a good program that gets you to those goals a whole lot faster. So profit, we got to focus on it. And remember, profit is not what's left over. It's what you plan for. And holding on to it without guilt is one of the most powerful mindset shifts that you can make. I definitely had a lot of guilt around money. I felt like I didn't deserve it when I made a lot of it. Oh my goodness. I've talked about this on my old podcast, Online Marketing Made Easy. There was a time where when I made a lot of money, I felt very guilty, like I didn't deserve it. And I looked around for like the other shoe to drop. I was ready for something bad to happen. And one time, Cade, my stepson, was very little. I think he was 6 or 7 years old. And that night, I had just finished a launch and I made $30,000. It was a course about Facebook advertising. And I was so excited, but there was that little voice in my head, something bad's going to happen. Something good just happened, so something bad's going to happen. I know I've been to a lot of therapy and I do not feel this way anymore, but it was very present in my early years of business. And that night, Cade was in our kitchen and he was swinging in between two countertops, like going back and forth with his arms. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's kind of like this between two countertops. And he swung up real hard and boom, landed on our tile. And I heard his head crack on that tile. And I heard something. I'm like, oh my God, I froze. Right even now talking about it makes my stomach hurt. And he was not bleeding or anything. He just was crying a lot. It hurt really bad. I remember he was in like his little Superman jammies. I remember it like it was yesterday. So I asked Hobie what we should do. He's like, let's just monitor him. At the time, Hobie was a firefighter already. So he had medical experience. So he thought, let's just wait and see what happens. In the middle of the night, Cade started throwing up. He had a concussion. So we had to rush him to the hospital, emergency room, and he had a brain bleed. And it was really, really scary. And so in my mind, guess what I did? Something good just happened. So something bad has to happen. So like I'm doing air quotes, had proof that that is true. So that was a very big mountain I had to get past with making money and feeling like it wasn't just a fluke and being proud of it and owning it. And when I did, my profit definitely soared. But it took a moment. So ask yourself, do you ever feel guilty when it's all working out, when the money's really flowing? Maybe you haven't gotten to that point yet. You're like, Amy, I hope I get to that point. But for those of you who have had that experience, check yourself because you do deserve it. You did work hard for that. And it's not a fluke. All things that I had to learn the hard way. Okay, pillar number 3. So we have revenue, then we have profit. Pillar 3 is the energy of attraction, which is leads. So we've got to talk about tracking leads. So every month, I want you to do this, but especially dig in during a promotion or a launch. Track your lead flow in detail. I track my overall leads from any launch I do, but more importantly, I also break down where they came from. This is important. So for example, in my launch for my signature offer, Digital Course Academy, I track unique leads from each of my pre-launch lead magnets. Unique leads means, let's say I put out 3 lead magnets during my launch. If someone signs up for 2 of those, that's not 2 leads, that's 1. It's just 1 unique lead that happened to sign up for more than one thing during my launch. So I track all the leads from my pre-launch, and then I track leads from my bootcamp, leads from my webinar. I do webinars outside of the bootcamp. So if someone signs up for the bootcamp and happens to sign up for a webinar outside of the bootcamp, I don't know why they would. It's almost an identical webinar, but they do. That's just 1 lead. And then leads from things like my sneak peek during my Digital Course Academy launch. Or if I do pop-up trainings, like I do this training called No Business Plan Live Session during my launch, I track those leads. And I definitely track the leads where they're coming from. Are they coming from paid advertising? Are they coming from social? Are they coming from my email list? And of course, I want the bulk to come from my email list because I've worked hard to nurture that list and now they're free. I'm not paying for all of those. So organic. Organic would be social media and email list essentially, and those that come from my podcast if I do an ad on the podcast. So I try to break it down as much as possible. Keep this part simple if you've never really broken it down. Don't try to track like 100 different things. Maybe your top 5 things that you can track, do so. And here's why this matters. When you know where each lead came from, you can look back post-launch and pinpoint exactly what brought in the right people. So you can double down, tweak where you might have missed the mark, and then you can cut what didn't move the needle. I've absolutely done stuff. Like we used to do Facebook Lives back in the day for Digital Course Academy. And we started to track the leads that came through those Facebook Lives. First of all, people stopped showing up for Facebook Lives. And then 2, those leads were not converting well. We started to get really weird people in the comments. They had no idea who I was and they were asking really like jerky questions because they were just being jerks. And so I thought something weird is happening here. Let's stop doing this. These leads are not quality leads. So it saved me a lot of time, but also it just allowed me to put my focus elsewhere and double down on what really did work. So if you do all of this, this lets you plan smarter and scale cleaner without wasting energy or strategies that don't serve your goals. So if we get a little philosophical on this, beyond what I just shared, lead generation isn't just about filling your email list. It's about expanding your energetic reach and being open to being seen online. So I don't tend to talk about energy a lot on this podcast, but the leads are a great example of you putting yourself out there and you getting your messaging out there, you not shying away from showing your face and taking up space online. Those leads are a reflection of that because they're people that see you online and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I love that. Like, pull me in. And so I really want you to look at your email list and see, does it represent you putting yourself out there? Is that list growing? Are you reaching the people that you want to? So I think looking at leads a little differently might kind of put that fire under you to do more bigger things online that mean something. So leads are more than just emails in your system. They are proof that your work is resonating. And so if that email list is growing slow or you hardly have one, you are not putting out enough work that is resonating with people, likely because you're just a little bit fearful to put yourself out there in a big way. So this is your nudge to do so. And here's the truth. Many people secretly resent lead generation because visibility feels vulnerable. It stirs up fear of being judged online or rejection or just like looking like maybe you're not doing enough. So with that, I think it's so important to ask yourself, why am I not putting myself out there more? Why am I not making the effort to grow my email list? Because my friend, the leads are such a huge part of you hitting your revenue goal. When you sit down and break the numbers down, which I'm going to do in a second, when you do that, I promise you, you'll say, holy crap, I need more leads. I've got to focus there. A lot of my beautiful Millie members are finally saying, hold on, I need to focus on the health of my email list. I didn't realize I wasn't hitting these goals because I wasn't. And when you avoid looking at your lead metrics, you're not just dodging numbers, you're avoiding being fully seen. You're avoiding the truth of your business. So the invitation here is to shift from chasing leads to welcoming them and treating that relationship with more intention and care. Because tracking your leads isn't just about bigger numbers. It's about respecting the humans on the other side of the screen who are choosing to engage with your work. That part is important. There are human beings, beating hearts that are on the other side of that email address. And we really need to respect that and intentionally work with that. Okay, moving into pillar 4, aligned conversions. So what to track with every single launch? Conversion rate. Once you've brought the right people into your world, the next question is, how many of them actually became paying customers? That's where conversion tracking comes in. And this is where I want you to go beyond the basics. This is where we break it down even more. So most people only track their overall conversion rate, the total number of buyers divided by the total number of leads. But if you stop there, you're missing the insight that can actually increase that number next time. So I think one of the secrets to my success is I really do know my launch numbers very, very well. And so I can see the levers that I need to pull in order to surpass my goal from last year. I could see where the conversions were the highest. Let me give you an example. I do a boot camp every year called Course Confident. It's one of my most favorite things I do for my Digital Course Academy launch. And the conversion of a boot camper is so much higher than even the conversion of someone that just got on a solo webinar. And the reason for that is I've built a connection, a real connection with people in my boot camp. I'm answering questions for them. I'm teaching them. I'm showing them how this all comes together so that they could get ready to create and launch their digital course inside my program. So when I realized that, when I crunched the numbers and realized where the leads were coming from and which leads were converting the best, I doubled down on my boot camp. I spend the majority of my ad money on my boot camp because I know that's where I can connect to the highest degree inside my business. So again, getting more specific on your conversion is so important. So here's what I do. First, when it comes to tracking conversions, my main focus is on my launch list. That's made up of the leads that we just talked about from my bootcamp, my masterclass, my sneak peeks, my pre-launch content, the quiz that I do in pre-launch, the freebies that I put out there. At the end of all that, that's my launch list, not my entire email list of people that didn't even participate. If I took my entire email list, I don't know, it might be 2%. I'm kind of guessing that number because I don't know for sure. 2-3% of my entire email list might engage in Digital Course Academy, enroll in it. So that's not the list that I'm focused on. I work really hard during pre-launch and filling up the boot camp and my webinars to get a really solid launch list that I will then email consistently till the end of the launch. And I might talk to each of them differently depending on where they came in, which is even cooler. If you could segment those lists during a launch, the conversions tend to be higher as well because they're more personalized. So I do track my full email list conversion. So I always have like a big picture. One is all the people on my email list. And two, the more important one to me is people actively engaged in the launch. That's the one that means the most to me. That's the one where I can pull the levers and see what I could do better next time. In my business, we track conversion the same way I just broke down how I track leads. So let's talk about bootcamp conversion rate. How many people who went through the bootcamp ended up buying? Or just a solo webinar, they were never in the bootcamp? Well, I do this in two ways. How many people signed up for the webinar, whether they attended or not, versus how many people bought. And then I really track how many people are on live on the webinar right now. And out of that, how many people did I convert? That number I'm really interested in because I know when I get somebody on live, I convert really well because I do a good job of delivering on all the promises of why they signed up in the first place. So that's a really big number for me. I break down every single webinar. And then I usually, this is cool. Here's a cool AI tip. You could take the transcript from two webinars, the same webinars, but just two different dates and times. Take those transcripts, feed them into ChatGPT and ask some really smart questions around why did this one convert higher than this one? What did I do differently in this one that I didn't do in that one? So if let's say you're going to do 3 live webinars in a launch and the first 2, put them into ChatGPT before you do the third one to see if you could do more of the good stuff in that third one. So I think that's a really cool way to use it. Okay, another area I track, I do a sneak peek. So I let people go into usually module 1 of Digital Course Academy during the promo so they can get a taste of what I'm going to offer. So if I do a little behind the scenes look, so I look and say, how many people went through that sneak peek and then how many people actually converted? Now, I know some of you are thinking, but wait, what if they also were in the bootcamp? And what if they also were on the webinar? I actually track that way too. What we noticed is if people opted into 2 or 3 of my launch or pre-launch activities, they're more likely to buy. And so I want them opting into the boot camp and the sneak peek because typically that's going to increase my chances that they convert. So that's another cool thing you could look at. You could look at a million things. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I just want to show you what's possible. So lead magnet conversion rate, that's another thing I look at. How did those who actually came in through specific lead magnets convert? Was there one lead magnet that had higher conversions into sales, not into a lead, but into sales more than another? You can bet next launch, I'll use that one and I probably won't use the one that didn't convert as high. So that's the stuff I'm looking at. I also track, like I said, we call it multi-touch conversion. I already just went over this, but real quick, so I make sure I do a good job of explaining it. Like, did someone join the boot camp and attend the webinar? I have numbers to track that. And how did that compare to someone who joined the webinar, not the boot camp, but also the sneak peek? Like, those are things that are so interesting. Now, I'm 1,000 launches in, right? So if you've never done a launch, you're not tracking all of this. You're likely not doing all of this. You're not doing sneak peeks and boot camps and webinars. I teach my new students, we're just doing webinars. You've got to get the webinars out of the way for your first launch before we start adding a bunch of layers. So I promise it makes a difference. You don't want to rush to do all of this stuff. You'll end up doing none of it. But in my launches, those multi-touch leads, again, always convert higher. So it is good for me to know, like, what's the right combination of things people engaged in order to see higher conversions? What really paid off the most? Let's do more of that in the next launch. And then, as I said, I have an overall launch list conversion. So this includes everyone who engaged with any pre-launch or launch content. And that's just interesting for me to know as well, but I don't really bank on that as much. So each of these touch points tell a different story and gives you clues into what's actually influencing purchase behavior, because if you separate these numbers, you can spot where conversion is high and lean into those strategies next time. You can see where leads are falling off and revise the content or experience. You can understand how different parts of my launch are working together or parts of your launch are working together. And these numbers also help set future launch goals based on real patterns, real data, not just guesses. There's no need for you to guess. And here's the bottom line. When you layer your conversion tracking, instead of just lumping everyone together with one conversion number, you stop operating on hunches and you start marketing from data. This is how you move from hoping it works to actually knowing what to repeat, what to refine, and what to let go of. And the result? More confident launches, stronger messaging, and offers that convert better every time you share them without wasting time. So most people see low conversion and think, I messed this up. But the better question is, where did the journey lose resonance? So when you have this level of tracking at each stage of your launch, this is where curiosity becomes your supporter. Remember, aligned conversion isn't about perfect numbers. It's about closing the gap between what you meant to say and what your audience actually heard. So your messaging gets stronger when you really start to understand your leads, your conversions, and your data. And you make sense of it. That's the other layer. The data is the data, but you have to make sense of it. Remember I said earlier, the data tells the story. Your job is to get better at understanding what is the story that is being told and how do you want to change the story. So before I let you go, here's what I want you to do. 1, I want you to choose 2 of these pillars from today's list that you're going to start tracking immediately if you're not already. Even if you're not launching right now, you can definitely track some of maybe the leads of lead magnets, obviously revenue, profit margin. So at least choose 2 if you don't do all 4. So this is going to help you build that muscle of data-driven leadership before you're in the thick of, let's say, your first launch or your next launch. 2, I want you to schedule a 30-minute CEO time block this week to review your numbers. Even if you only have partial data, even if you're a one-woman show, give yourself permission to at least start this, because as your business grows, as you start to launch more, you're going to want to get this all organized and understand it in advance. So, some key insights from this episode. You can't scale what you don't track. Tracking numbers gives you agency, not overwhelm. You stop throwing spaghetti at the wall and you start making decisions that are rooted in evidence. 2, your conversion rate is your business IQ. Understanding where leads convert and where they fall off gives you instant clarity on what to fix for your next launch. And lead generation is a numbers game with emotional stakes. Most course creators or membership creators or coaching entrepreneurs, they don't realize how many leads they need to meet their revenue goal. Break it down. You need to understand your lead and your conversion rates in order to understand what it will take to get to your goal. And then remember, profit is power. You don't need to make $1 million. You need to keep more of what you earn. Tracking profit margin keeps your business sustainable. And the fear of success is real. Many people, including many of the women I work with, sabotage success not out of laziness, but because it feels unfamiliar or unsafe, scary. So talking about this normalizes that fear. And remember, you are not bad at numbers, you're under practice. Most people, including a lot of the women I work with, were not taught to track and lead from data. But once you learn this, you feel more grounded and confident than ever before. And finally, abundance takes capacity. It's not enough to earn more. You have to hold it emotionally, energetically, and structurally. So this episode starts that conversation for you. I hope that you have found this valuable. I love talking about numbers because it makes you more powerful in your business. So you might need to listen to this episode one more time to let it all sink in, and maybe share it with one of your business peers that is also growing their business so the two of you can get on the same page with numbers, and then maybe start that group text where you start sharing more of behind the scenes of your businesses. I promise it makes a big difference. All right, my friend, I will see you again next week.